Hey everybody, welcome to Full Metal Pod. I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy.
So how has your past week been, despite the, I guess, craziness going on in the world? How have you been?
Um, Despite the craziness, because I feel like the craziness encompassed my whole Tuesday, but other than that, I've been binging The Big Bang Theory on HBO Max. I forgot how much I really like that show.
I am trying to remember which country it is. Maybe I think it's Belarus or something, but there's a country that has a sitcom called The Theorists, and it's pretty much a direct ripoff of Big Bang Theory. And I mean, I guess it helps if you can speak the language to understand what's going on in the show, but yeah, apparently they tried to sue them over it, but because the entire news station or TV station is owned by the government, they couldn't do anything about it.
Huh, that's very interesting, because I know, like, sometimes we remake shows from other countries here in America.
Yeah, but usually you get permission. So like the Good Doctor, for example, that actually originated as a Korean drama. I don't know, I think like 7 years ago or something like that. Pretty much the exact same plot and everything. But then I want to say Daniel Day Kim got the rights from the Korean creators, the Korean studios, to make it in America. So like that's while it's a quote unquote ripoff, it went through the proper channels to go through that route. Whereas yeah, I think from what I understand, they just kind of said, "Hey, that looks like a cool show. Let's make one."
Wait, Daniel Day Kim, like, lost Daniel Day Kim?
Yeah, that's if I'm not mistaken, I might be getting my actors confused, but I'm like 90% sure that I'm right about it being Daniel Day Kim.
Oh wow, that is very interesting. I did not know that. I love the first two seasons of The Good Doctor, and then I kind of fell off. But I might have to check out the Korean version of it though.
Yep, that's the original. It came out. I'm trying to remember because it came out like the early 2010s. I want to say like I don't know, maybe 2014 or something. And then yeah, and then now it's what 2007, 2013 I think is when it came out in Korea, and then the 2017 American version came out, and it's yeah, pretty much the exact same plot.
Interesting. Because I know like The Office. There was the British version, and then we had our own version here in America. And sometimes it's just like I know they're like the same show, but it's almost apples to oranges for me because of what you think of the different humor types and like what other places consider uh like other cultures. It's always interesting seeing the same idea done by a different
Oh
place.
yeah, that's true because they'll have the exact same plot, but the story itself will pan out differently, or maybe the episodes will be different, or how characters are portrayed are a bit different because of the differences in language and culture and whatnot.
Huh. I'll definitely have to find a place that's streaming it.
I think Viki has it. VIKI. It's like it's actually owned by Rakuten now, but I think in the early days it was pretty much just a community organized thing. So people would take episodes first, a lot of times first run episodes of like K dramas and Chinese dramas and Japanese dramas, and then translate it and put it dubbed, of course, or subbed. Sorry, not dubbed. They'll sub it and put it online so people could watch it. And I think now they actually have a like a paid subscription. They have a free version, but a paid subscription and kind of a more Netflix model. But it's, if you're into like all the different Asian dramas and stuff, it's a pretty cool system.
Oh, I'll have to definitely check it out. You said Vicky?
Yeah, VIKI. We are not sponsored by Viki. I am going to mention that now. We actually have zero sponsors, but we are open to having them if you want to sponsor us.
Yeah, I would love a sponsor. Disney Plus, sponsor us. That'd be nice.
I agree. I would enjoy that very much too. Just anybody to make it easier for us to do what we do. But yeah, I don't use it all the time, but there's like times where I'll just be like, you know what, I feel like watching Vicky, and then I'll put on some kind of K drama or something. But since I do it so infrequently, it's like when I put it on, there's 10 new shows, 20 new shows, whatever, and I'm like, oh, huh, I guess it has been like a year since I've logged on.
I haven't watched a Korean drama in a very long time, but there is one that I really liked, and it was on Netflix, and it was about like feudal Korea, but then there were zombies, and the first season was dubbed and had subtitles, I believe, but the second season has nothing. Like it's not dubbed and it has no subtitles, and it was very disappointing because I love a, a zombie show, zombies and werewolves. If you got one or the other, I'm pretty much
Like
in.
I've never jumped onto the zombie bandwagon, if you will, but I am not against it either. Like I'm trying to remember the last zombie thing I watched. Maybe it was the Zombieland Double Tap, but it still has its place. I enjoy it.
Oh, the show was called The Kingdom. I just looked it up on my phone. Oh man, I watched so many zombie things. I don't know what the last. I guess I've been watching The Walking Dead a lot this past past season. I kind of I it's run its course, I think, but I really wanted to like I've been hooked. So you know when you have to finish
Hmm.
something, even though you're like, oh, it's not as good as it used to be, but I need to see this through the end. That's how I'm feeling with The Walking Dead right now.
Yeah, I feel the same way about some things, like even things that I hate, because I'm like, you know what? I'm already so invested in it. I need to see it to the end. Uh, I never, like, just for the record, I was never a fan of the Twilight films. I just kept getting dragged to each one as they came out. But like, I was already four in, and I never saw the fifth one, and I was like, I'm kind of invested now. I know it's a terrible film, but I kind of want to know how it ended. So that yeah, I wound up renting it and watching it.
I would say I saw the first Twilight movie. I've seen them all, disclaimer, but I saw the first one and I listened to this podcast called "How Did This Get Made?" And Paul Shear's the host, and they do the Twilight movies. They just talk about bad movies and they kind of give their review on them. And they went through the Twilight movies, and every time they would come out with a new one for the Twilight movie, I would go out and watch it. And I will say though, the last Twilight movie has a really cool vampire werewolf fight scene at the end.
It does. Jumping a little bit backwards when we were talking about like Korean movies and stuff, I just learned about one. It's been out for a while. It's on Netflix called The Call, and it's like, did you ever see the Dennis Quaid, Jim Caviezel movie from I want to say was it 2000 Frequency?
Yes, where they like hear the dead people's voices, I believe.
Or not no, it's the one where like he gets his dad's old CB radio and he's able to talk to him 30 years in the past.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm getting that confused with like that movie White Noise, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, like okay, yeah, I remember that movie.
Yeah, so this movie is called The Call, and it's a Korean drama or Korean film, and it follows the same basic idea where this girl is able, on the phone in her house, able to call back 20 years in the past in the house and talk to like the previous occupant. But it has more of a sinister twist to it, whereas it was more of a yeah, feel good, happy movie with frequency. This one has not so much. It's more of a suspense thriller type film. So definitely would recommend the watch.
Wow, man. So she calls back to the house she's in, but the owner is 20 years ago, 20 years in the past.
Yeah, it's like 20 years to the minute.
Oh man. See, then like I feel like you can't really give them advice because, well, I guess you could help strangers. That's not that bad of a thing. But if I could call myself 20 years in the past, that'd be more helpful.
Yeah, I highly recommend giving it a watch on Netflix. It is really good
I'll definitely have to check it out. I'll let you know what I think next week.
indeed. And while we still have a little time before we start the podcast, I do want to mention, and since Tenet is available to rent, I would recommend people rent it, but you may want to buy it instead because you're going to have to watch it 3 or 4 times just to figure out everything that happened.
I that is still on my need to watch list. I really feel like I need to not have any distractions near me and just be in the zone watching Tenet.
Yeah. Even if you're paying complete attention to the film, even when you get to the ending, you're still going to be like, what? So you're going to have to watch it again.
Is it more than like the end of Inception where that top is spinning? Like
Yeah,
more of a like what's going on?
no, it's even crazier than that. I mean, it deals with time travel and grandfather paradox and all that crazy stuff. So trying to figure out exactly how the world works and who is where, when, and whatnot, it's just like crazy.
And this is a Christopher Nolan movie, right?
Yep, yep.
Okay, I'll definitely have to check it out. And it ties in with our Twilight. Isn't Robert Pattinson in this movie?
Yes, he is. And now I have a like I always thought of Robert Pattinson as being Edward. I was like, man, I never really gave him a fair shake because he wound up being such a good actor.
And soon he'll be Batman.
Well, cool. I think on that we can just jump straight into the podcast.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, we're on season 4. So yay, one more this season and one more after that. And I will say, so when we talked about how season 2 had my favorite outro music, my favorite intro song is definitely in season 4, Period Chemistry, and it is just awesome. So I am going to be enjoying these next few episodes. But we have episode 40, which is Dwarf in the Flask, and episode 41, The Abyss. And let's talk a little bit about the first one. And the first one, we get a lot of interesting backstory. But first, we see Fort Briggs, a military leader from Central, is talking about how it appears that Armstrong is likely responsible for the disappearance of Raven. However, she is also too smart to leave behind any evidence, but they are pretty sure that Central will be able to figure out what happened. We see Armstrong being escorted in Central down a hallway, and she bumps into Mustang. You could definitely tell there's some kind of rivalry going on, but I think it's fair to say that she's more invested in it than Mustang is, because Mustang is trying to be friendly, but Armstrong is being, well, Armstrong. She tells Mustang the Fuhrer summoned her here, and Mustang offered to meet her for dinner. She says that she can eat him into bankruptcy, and just this back and forth went on for a bit. She goes on to talk to the Fuhrer. The Fuhrer wants answers about Raven. Armstrong realizes she can't hide it all, so she twists it in her favor. She asks the Fuhrer how he could involve an incompetent person like Raven. Raven came in and just spouted out all the secrets to Armstrong. Armstrong just said, Raven was here. He was taught about the country's history. He talked about the Fuhrer being a homunculus, talked about immortality and more. So then the Fuhrer asks her, well, cool, if you know all this stuff, why did you still come here when I called? And she said she came because she wants to fill the seat of Raven. The Fuhrer likes the way she played, so she gave her Raven's seat, but he then took Briggs, so now Briggs is under his control. Going back to Briggs, Buccaneer is talking to a soldier, a Briggs soldier specifically, talking about how Armstrong is gone and Central has moved in. However, the one thing that Central doesn't realize is that even without their leader, Briggs soldiers act as one unit, one force. We see the cafeteria, and Mustang joins Riza for some lunch. They have a casual, lunchtime work chit chat, and Riza sees her shadow, which reminds her of Pride. So she tries to find a way to inform Mustang of what she had learned without directly telling him what she had learned. So she kind of signals by tapping her cup to let him know that, okay, we're going to be talking in code right now. And she starts telling a story and starts talking about work and stuff, but she would use people's names like Scar, Elric Brothers, Havoc, etc., etc. And her plan was that the first letter of every name was a letter for the sentence. And Mustang taps his pen to acknowledge that he understands she's speaking in code. Mustang's able to piece together that she's saying Salim Bradley is a homunculus, and Mustang just has this oh no realization. We then see Father. closed his eyes, kind of in contemplation, sitting on his throne. And we just do a quick flashback to ancient Xerxes. When we were in Xerxes, it kind of looks like how I'd imagine ancient Persia or Babylon to look like, just for context. We see a young man, probably about the age of Edward Elric, and he is slacking off a little bit. He hears a voice coming from the void. He then realizes the voice is coming from this flask on the desk. There's like this little black ball in the flask. The voice asks him what's his name. The slave replies, number 23. The flask asks for his actual name, not his number, to which the slave replies, I have no name. I'm a slave. The flask tells him, well, then he's nothing more than a piece of property with no rights and is traded. Well, we've also noticed that the slave has kind of a bandage on his arm, or he does have a bandage on his arm. And apparently, an alchemist from Xerxes used the slave's blood as part of an experiment. The flask then responds that that experiment was actually what created him. Uh, they used the slave's blood in order to create this little black ball. The flask decides to give number 23 a name. Originally, he gives him Theophatus Bombastus, but he figured it was too complicated for him to understand. So instead, he gave him the name of Van Hohenheim. They continue to have a conversation, and the little black dot, the flask, realizes that Hohenheim is unable to read or write since he's a lowly slave. It's not relevant to his work. And Flask asks, well, if he ever wants to be free, if he ever wants to live his life as a free man, I mean, if he doesn't, well, then really he's no different than him trapped inside the flask. Little flask creature offers to educate him. Hohenheim asks what the creature is. The little black ball shifts his form, and he becomes very similar to the shadows of Pride, or like the little eye you see in the gate, but it has a mouth. And he says, "Oh, you can call me Dwarf in the Flask Homunculus." We see a time montage pass as Hohenheim begins to learn to read, write, as well as the finer parts of alchemy. Hohenheim goes from being a slave to being an alchemist. Hohenheim says that he's grateful to the homunculus for giving him freedom. He can now go out and enjoy life and, maybe one day get married and have a family. The homunculus tells him that it's sad that humans cannot exist unless they form communities and breed. Hohenheim says that humans live for the bonds that they form. He then asks what would make the homunculus happy. Homunculus simply says he would be happy if he could leave the flask. We jump a little further in time. The homunculus is brought before the king without Hohenheim present, and apparently the homunculus was created for the sole purpose of giving the king the answer to immortality. The king essentially begs him, do you have the answer? Because the homunculus is not really keen on answering any questions, and he eventually says, yeah, I can tell you exactly how to get you immortality. We then see a few familiar actions taking place. Men are digging what they think is an irrigation ditch around Xerxes. Then we also see slaughters taking place around random villages. So it is clear that they are carving crests of blood and are trying to create a transmutation circle around the country. We then see some alchemists, Hohenheim, the king, and the homunculus present. The homunculus is obviously still in his flask, being held by Hohenheim. And if the king sits in the exact center of the transmutation circle, he will gain immortality. So he activates the transmutation circle, but then he realizes things have gone not as planned. We start to see these giant tendrils come out of the ground, and everybody starts to collapse in the room, and they seem to be gasping for air or whatnot. Well, Hohenheim is kind of scared because he's like, hey, this isn't supposed to happen. What's going on? Well, it turns out that they aren't actually in the exact center. Well, the king isn't in the exact center, but Hohenheim and the homunculus are. This was all part of the homunculus's plan, and Hohenheim was none the wiser for it. We see them being broken down into like their elemental parts or whatever. and then we just see what looks like a giant eye appear from the ground of Xerxes, just the entire size of the country. And then chaos ensues, darkness envelops, and then the next thing we know, it's morning. Hohenheim wakes up, broken flask near him. He sees the bodies of the king and the other alchemists, and he calls out their name, but they're unresponsive. He starts to wander around the city a bit, and he sees everybody just lifeless and passed out, and he's wondering, man, what's going on? He sees somebody in royal type robes behind him, and he realizes, oh, maybe it's the king. So he turns around, but then he notices it's not the king. The creature or whatever it is looks exactly like him. Oh, so it's real. He realizes that this person is actually the homunculus. The homunculus was able to create a body by using Hohenheim's blood that looks like Hohenheim. It's more of just a more advanced flask, if you will. So that is why Father looks exactly like Hohenheim. Apparently, they created a transmutation circle and they sacrificed all the souls of Xerxes to create a philosopher's stone. And right now, Hohenheim and the homunculus are physical versions of the philosopher's stone, each one having half of the population of Xerxes, about a little over 500,000 people each. Hohenheim naturally just freaks out because he never wanted this. He doesn't know what to think of it. And of course, he can hear all the souls in his body. Hohenheim wakes up from a nightmare while riding on the train. He runs into Azumi Curtis, who recognizes him as the Elric's father, and they have a chat. As they exit the train and they're walking around with Sig, she begins to get sick, as she has been. Hohenheim asks Sig to find a car. Hohenheim asks Zumi if she had seen the truth, and she mentioned that she did. She sacrificed her internal organs to bring her child back to life. Hohenheim sticks his hand in Azumi. At first, you think he may be harming her, but we realize that he is actually just rearranging her organs in order to ease the pain. He says that he cannot return what was taken from her, but he can make the blood flow easier so she'll be in significantly less pain, which she is. Credits roll. Post-credit scene, we hear Edward talk about how the Philosopher's Stone is able to have any form, liquid, uh, little stone that we see, what's his face carrying, Kimley carrying, but also, as we know, it could take the form of a human, in this case, Hohenheim, and, well, the homunculus. So we finally got an origin story for the homunculus and Hohenheim. What did you get out of this episode?
So my initial thoughts of this episode were like, what the what? Like, the backstory to Hohenheim is bananas, and I'm here for it. I loved it all, and it's great seeing more of him because what we got for of who Hohenheim was, I guess, before the end of last season and the beginning of this season, was very a stoic, distant person that we didn't know much of. And now we're kind of seeing like he's a kinder person, or he has a heart.
Yeah, it definitely does paint him in a different light because up to this point, we think that he may be just, nothing more than a cold and distant father. But then we realize, oh, well, no, his past is a little deeper. And now we also understand why father looks exactly like him.
Yes, the that mystery is solved. I think we always knew like there was some kind of thread to both of them. It's not coincidence they look the same. But I don't know. I feel like this happens a lot in shows where something that's clearly treacherous or can talk or has a mind of its own that's imprisoned is left somewhere, and someone's always cleaning that room, and that thing kind of gets into their mind, and we see it happen here. I'm like, people, stop leaving these things on your desk.
Yeah, and as far as we could tell, I mean, I don't think they straight up say it, but pretty implied that this may be one of the first homunculi ever created. And so that's kind of interesting. And I've actually just sat kind of racking my brain trying to figure out, like, okay, so how was this homunculus created? And the best theory I could come up with was that he is actually part of the gate, which is why he kind of looks like that black ooze with the eye and stuff. But he's got a semi-physical form because they used human blood to create him. So it's like they pulled a piece of the gate out and gave it a form inside of a flask. I think that's like my best idea of what the homunculus is, because they also later say that they kind of created him to get secrets of immortality. So it's like, oh, so they pulled a piece of the gate out to tell them knowledge or whatever.
True, and it's just I don't I don't know. It's just like you can't trust this thing. It's weird looking and it's has an attitude when it talks to people. You just can't trust this like my neighbor Totoro dust mite looking thing. It's it's no good. And you're everyone's holding it in this little flask thing and oh, but I like getting the preview of seeing what Xerxes was before everything happened.
Exactly. And I also like seeing the whole origin of Hohenheim going from slave to, like, he's doing well with his life. He's gone from being a slave to being an educated alchemist. He's a free man now, everything. And then just without him knowing, all of a sudden now he has 500,000 souls in him, and it just drove him crazy. And now we're kind of getting that context about why he thinks he's a monster and everything like that.
This episode had me very confused about Hohenheim. I mean, well, just for a minute. There's that scene in the very first part of this episode where um, I don't know what we calling it, the dwarf in the flask,
Hmm.
but they're talking to each other. Hohenheim still doesn't have his name yet. He's just what is it, number 23, and sweeping, and then the homunculus is talking to him, and he gets like this evil look in his face, like, oh, I could do something with this knowledge or whatnot. And for a minute there, I'm like, oh, he's going to be persuaded to go on this evil side. But watching this full episode, I feel like he was never tempted or he was never pulled to the evil side of this. I think he was always just kind of like a unknowing participant of what's going on.
Yeah, because the homunculus being in a flask, he had no way of getting to the exact center anyway, so he probably used Hohenheim for that unknowingly. And then also, he basically said like that making him a philosopher's stone was his way of saying thank you for giving me life, since it was his blood that created him. But I'm sure there's some truth to that, but I think it's also just a convenience thing, because there's no way the flask could have gotten to the center without him. So just like he was convenient there holding him, so that's why.
But I also feel like Hohenheim is, I don't want to say not the smartest person, but I think out of the group of people that were in that area, you got what, the Emperor, and then Hohenheim's master, and I guess some another like top leaders of the country who are supposed to be in the center area. But I think he needed someone that if he was going to have to give someone immortality and this gift of becoming a philosopher's stone, I guess Hohenheim would be his best bet that it wouldn't bite him in the butt.
Yeah, Hohenheim pretty much trusts him explicitly, just because of, I guess it's just because of the nature of the relationship. Because as he said, he would still be a slave if it weren't for the education that the homunculus gave him.
Yes, and I don't remember the names he was saying in like 4 episodes ago, but are they the same names that he was saying after he left like he was leaving the temple and he was calling out, I guess, his friends or
It
people? I wonder if those are the same names. I didn't go back and check.
it may be. I'd have to check that out. I honestly did not think about that until right now.
So yeah, I thought that was interesting because it was a we heard a list of names in that episode. We kind of thought we knew, but now it's like 100% sure that he is a philosopher's stone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he's a living philosopher's stone in the form of a human. And from earlier episodes, we know that Xerxes was destroyed around 400 years prior to the start of the show. So yeah, he's definitely over 400 years old.
And it we get a glimpse of I don't know if Xerxes is as big as what we're dealing with now, but we get to see like what could happen if they complete the circle and they perform all this.
Yeah, Xerxes seemed to only have about 1 million people. I think Amestris is definitely larger than that. And yeah, we now see that they're trying to do the exact same thing, but now it also asks the question, what what is he trying to create another philosopher's stone for? Another philosopher's stone that large? Like we've seen other philosopher's stones that were created with, maybe a dozen Ishvalans and whatnot, and they seem to be pretty powerful. Why does he need another multi-million size? Like he has to have something greater planned.
Yeah, it's just well, he's there. So we got father already, and then he's got his the homunculi already. And it's just I don't know. Kimberly talks about a couple episodes ago about he wants to see who comes out on top. Is it going to be them or is it going to be the human race? So are they trying to take over the world? I don't know.
Maybe we do know that the homunculi that we've met so far are not like they're independent creatures, but not really. Like they seem to be extensions of Father, created from Father. So maybe he needs more Philosopher's Stones to create more children, so to speak. Who knows?
I really like this episode. This might be one of my favorite episodes after watching it now because I love thinking about Hohenheim and how he's lived such a life. And I like Ed and Al are his first kids because I assume they're his first kids because he doesn't really. You feel like he has this emotion for them, but he doesn't really quite understand children. So yeah, so it just makes me think of like he's lived through this whole life. Why did he met their mother and like what kind of bond was that for him?
Yeah, that's a good question because I remember in one of the earlier episodes he talks about how he's been wandering the world for several hundred years, and he just to not drive himself crazy, he would just find joy in small things and whatnot. But it wasn't until he met Trisha that he actually fell in love and wanted to start a family. So yeah, I guess he just gone through his whole life just not really associating with anybody closely anyway, and not until we met Trisha, then that's when he actually started a family and started to reevaluate things.
I do wonder if because he is an unwilling participant in all this sacrificing of people, and if that weighed on him for how many we don't know how many years, but I can't imagine like their deaths are inside you. You can't leave them, and we've seen it before. Like the souls are like still kind of bubbling in there.
Hmm. Yeah, and he also doesn't really like, not to take it in a grim direction, but he also really has no way to stop it either. Like he can't go, he's effectively immortal, so he can't go like, end his life or anything like that. So he's just stuck having to hear all of the wailing of the souls and everything, and having to live with the knowledge that he's immortal because all these people were sacrificed, and he didn't ask for it. Like he had nothing to do with it.
I do like at the end of this episode, him and teacher meet, and I think I don't know. I'm just like, oh, are they getting together? Is like another team forming? I don't think so, but it's like it's interesting. We see him on the move, so he must be sensing like something's happening, and it's interesting that him and teacher are heading to the same place almost
Yeah.
because they're on the train together and they leave the train station because they're walking through the city together. So They must be going to a nearby place together.
Probably they were probably heading in the same direction because it didn't look like they were boarding together. Like it didn't look like their plan was to travel together. They just happened to run into each other. But yeah, it seems like they might be teaming up now.
It's oh man, it's very interesting, and I like she gets sick, and then he puts his hand on her like back, and it's like, "You've seen the truth, haven't you?" It's great that he can sense that.
Yeah, who knows what the extent of his powers are with him being a philosopher's stone.
True, and like, how much truth has he seen? Because think about what now? Ed gave up his arm. Did he give up his arm or his leg? He gave up a limb, and he saw so much truth. But can you imagine 500,000 people being sacrificed? Like, how much truth do you see with that? Like everything, right?
Probably. Like that would probably be a fair assessment. He saw almost everything by going through that.
So I don't know if we might be waiting for him to join up with like his sons, but he's gonna be like a really powerful weapon.
Yeah, I mean, technically, since both of them only have half of the Philosopher's Stone, he would be on par with Father, theoretically, in terms of power. So that will be fun to watch.
And now I like thinking about it, like how I don't know. Do we call him Father or is he the dwarf in the flask? I think I'm just gonna call him Father, and how Father was in the flask at the beginning, and now he has a body. Does that mean his body is just like just kind of a flesh body, and then he can go back to being? If we destroy that, does he go back to being like the dwarf in the flask?
I think so. I think he actually just dies. That's what I understand might happen because he can't survive on his own. So like yeah, that human body is essentially just a vessel for him. My understanding, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is like if that body broke or whatnot, he probably would die. The question is how to destroy that body, but yeah,
I wonder how strong he is.
I guess we'll find out. Like clearly, he's able to defeat Scar without moving a muscle, and he was able to heal uh, Ed without much power, and he was able to create metal without without the equivalent exchange. So he's clearly on another level.
I'm oh, I know he's probably gonna be like the last fight. We're saving him, but it all this is getting me really excited. Kind of, it seems like all the backstory pieces that I didn't even know that I wanted are being filled in. So this is a great episode.
Yeah, they're just lining everything up now. Like all the exposition is done, so all they can do is move forward with the larger plan.
Yeah, this episode was definitely like a shocked face, eyes popping out of my head episode because we get all this backstory at Hohenheim, but then we get like Hawkeye and Mustang secret code, finding out that Salim is a homuncula. It everything's crazy now.
Yeah, everything's just coming all together. Now Mustang has to figure out what to do with that information.
And Armstrong is in Central now, so they're communicating with each. Now they can really just like sit down and talk, if they can.
That's that's true. I mean, they'll probably find a way to do it, but they'll have to do it in secret since Mustang is a person of interest for the not the homunculi. Well, yeah, for the homunculi, but also for the Fuhrer and military and everything. So if they saw him openly talking with her, they'd probably suspect her of something nefarious.
I hope the Armstrongs get together. Like I want to see her and her brother. I don't know doing what, but like I think it would be fun to see them together.
Yeah, well, I think inevitably we'll have to now that they're both in Central, so that's going to be a very fun thing to watch.
But yeah, overall this episode, like I said, probably one of my favorites. I really loved it. I didn't think I was the very first like minute of it, I wasn't feeling it too much. But then at the end, I'm like, this is a great episode.
I agree. Definitely a great episode, and I I think I'm gonna watch it again to be honest. Just everything that happened, see if there's anything that I missed, even though I watched it like twice already in the past day or so.
I also feel like I can't watch My Neighbor Totoro anymore without looking at those dust mites and being like, oh, maybe they're homunculus, just like around.
Maybe they are.
Totoro is like doing some alchemy now.
He is. He's binding souls.
Oh, and there's like a dying mother in that movie too. Wow, it's like so many connections.
Yes, indeed. The Alchemist ties into a lot of other things, I gotta say.
But yeah, it's just
I,
great. Like not filler episode, great informational episode.
I agree. I think we're moving past information and moving back into action with the next episode. Ready to go?
Yep.
So the next episode, 41, is called The Abyss. We see pretty much we're following two teams, the tunnel team and the above ground team, what we remember from the previous episode as they're trying to get away from Kimberly. The tunnel team is heading down the tunnel. They come across dynamite. It's wet, so they realize it's probably going to be fine. Like it couldn't explode even if they wanted to. We jump back to Edward and Miles and that team. The storm has finally passed, so Miles orders the Briggs men to take out Kimberly's men. Naturally, Edward takes exception with that idea. Miles says the careless die up in Briggs. That is kind of their rule. Showing mercy to Kimberly would ultimately get them killed. Miles and his men have a talk, and they talk a little bit about how naive Ed is, but they also kind of admire his conviction. Miles mentions that he realized it was easier to kill somebody than to let them go away and do something wrong. We jump to the tunnel and we see the team trying to translate the notes. They talk about gold and this root that's used for healing and stuff, and how it might mean immortality in a person. Mei Chang says that it must be related to Shingi's alchemy because in Shingi's alchemy they have the Shinhito, or they have that term which means the true person or the golden person. And in Shingi's alchemy, that's meant to mean like a perfect being. So they realize, oh, so that must be like where the term for gold and this notes come from. And she mentions that it comes that they originally came up with that idea because the man who introduced them to alchemy had golden hair and eyes, and he taught them the basics of alchemy in Xing. Winry mentions that it sounds like Ed and Al, gold hair, gold eyes. And when they're telling the story, we see like a picture of Hohenheim. So it is strongly suggested that Hohenheim is that gold man. The team exits the tunnel, starts walking when they hear a muffled scream from Al, who is buried from snow. They dig him out, and he warns them that Armstrong has left Briggs, and Central is now controlled of Briggs, and of course, now it's no longer safe. They decide that they have to find some place to hang out. Like, they can't just stay in the snow. Scar says that there's a mountain village called Azbek, which is also an Ishvalan kind of refugee camp, so they could head there. Now, in order to trick Kimberly, Ed created a fake Alphonse armor, and one of the soldiers is inside pretending to be Al. Kimberly's squad is heading to the mine shaft to check. Miles decides to have snipers positioned near the mine shaft because once they get down to the mine shaft, it'll only be a matter of time before they figured out what happened to the other guys or that they escaped from the mine shaft. Ed has a problem with this, so he breaks away and he tries to stop Kimberly through words. So he goes up and he approaches Kimberly and tells them that he should let the Briggs soldiers check out the tunnels instead. Kimberly realizes that since Ed is slowing him down, something must be up. Kimberly puts together that snipers are around him, and before the snipers get a chance to shoot, Kimberly causes an explosion which kicks up snow and obstructs the sniper's view. Ed tries to go after Kimberly as he makes his way down the mine, but Ed is stopped by two Chimera. The other two men that were guarding Kimley were Chimera, a lion and a gorilla Chimera. The snow is obstructing the view, but of course the Chimera have strong sense of smell, so they're able to smell Ed's location. Not being able to see him is not a problem. Ed gets pushed down the mine shaft, and the Chimera come into pursuit. Ed notices some dynamite, and even though it's wet, he realizes that ammonia is one of the ingredients. And so he uses alchemy to revert the dynamite into ammonia gas, which the overpowering smell renders the Chimera knocked out and useless. So that just leaves Kimley and Ed to fight. Ed warns that he just wanted to talk, and Kimley says he doesn't have the time. So Kimley takes out his stone. He plans to use it, but then Ed attacks, knocking the stone out of his hand down the mine shaft. And Ed then scratches his palm, which has that transmutation circle tattooed on it, rendering it kind of useless. Kimberly says that it's admirable that Ed won't kill him, but he had successfully given him a second chance to kill Ed. He then reveals that he has a second Philosopher's Stone and proceeds to blow up the mine shaft, which causes Ed to fall down along with the two Chimera, but Kimberly is fine and is able to escape. Ed realizes that he is in dire trouble as he has been impaled by some iron after falling through the shaft. Ed is slowly dying, which results of Al's soul slowly being pulled out of his armor. So we see him just kind of collapse in the snow, and everybody's wondering what's happening, and he's yelling something about his body's pulling him back. Ed decides to use alchemy to free the Chimera, and he says he needs them free because he can't remove the pipe from him on his own. And obviously the Chimera take exception with it because they're like, hey, as soon as we remove this, you're going to bleed out and die. Ed says, well, I'm going to try to heal myself with my alchemy. And so what Ed decides to do is use his soul, part of his soul, to be like a very very, very small Philosopher's Stone, and use it to heal himself as soon as they pull out the metal. As they pull out, Ed is naturally in a lot of pain, and he's just playing it over in his mind, reminding himself that he has a single soul Philosopher's Stone and to use the alchemy to seal his wound. It is successful, well, in a sense anyway. He was able to stop the bleeding and attach the undamaged organs and whatnot, but he isn't 100% still. He probably still needs to see a doctor. But Ed says, well, I don't have time to see a doctor. I need to go after Kimley, but he shortly passes out. The Chimera find the lost Philosopher's Stone that Ed knocked out of Kimley's hand earlier in the fight, and they pick it up. The two Chimera decide to defect because, hey, Kimberly left them for dead, so why would they care what Kimberly wants? And they pick up Ed and try to find him a doctor. And our episode ends there. So I thought a lot happened. What about you?
I didn't like this episode as much as like the last one, but we're getting more. We're not getting more backstory. Well, we got a little backstory about, I guess, what Hohenheim was doing his whole life. That he was in Jing for a little bit, teaching alchemy. But I loved it. This episode, we get to learn more about Ed's philosophy on war and kind of how he's not, I guess, a soldier. That he wants to help people, and he wants to because we just dealt with the Chimera soldiers a few episodes back, and we learned that they want to change and turn a new leaf, and how Miles just kind of wants to shoot Kimberly and his two soldiers, and how Ed doesn't want to do that. I like that he still has humanity in him.
Yeah, that is something that stands with Ed and Al throughout the whole series, is that they just won't take another person's life regardless. They think everybody deserves to live. We've seen that quite a few times, even with the Slicer brothers in Laboratory 5 in earlier episode, and also, of course, those other two Chimera from previous episode. So we see, yeah, that they just have the strict rule about taking people's lives, even if they are just terrible people.
I liked that a lot. I also realized how I can never be an alchemist. When Ed saw that dynamite and the two chimeras saw it, they knew the whole breakdown of the dynamite when he turned into ammonium. Ammonium? Yeah. That's what he turned into,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And
Yep.
I would have not I do not I wonder if they just know the breakdown of everything.
Yeah, I think that is part of. I mean, I guess you could say it's like with any job where you have to kind of know a lot of stuff. And I'm guessing alchemy, like one of the prerequisites to be a great alchemist is to understand all of the different chemistry and whatnot. And I guess the more you understand that stuff, the better an alchemist you are.
It was a very like he grabbed an item, he knew everything off the top of his head. I was very impressed.
Uh-huh. Well, that's why he's one of the youngest alchemists ever to exist, or yeah, the youngest state alchemist.
I also love the comedy relief we got in this episode, starting with Al's foot, like finding Al in the snow. It was very hilarious seeing him
Hmm.
call for help.
Yeah, and then I also liked when we saw the fake Alphonse, the guy in the body of armor, and he tries to say, "I'm coming, brother," but like in a really high-pitched voice to sound like Alphonse.
Oh yeah, and then it makes you realize how many times Al says that, like how he's coming after Ed, or he's like, "Hey, wait up for me." It was it was great.
I loved it too. It was so awesome. I think, and I think that's kind of the first time we've ever seen him. I mean, granted, I'm sure he's used it other times, but this is the first time in the series that we see him use that approach of trickery, creating a fake Alphonse.
Which they probably don't have to keep up anymore because Kimberly is on his own now, and the
Hmm.
two soldiers are on their team. Though we don't know where they're going. They kind of just took him and they were like, "We got to go find a doctor." So is it like their kind of doctor, like a doctor they know, or are they going to go to the military?
My guess is they're just going to find some doctor nearby to treat him. I'm guessing they're going to try to avoid the military because they mentioned how Kimberly thinks they're dead now because of the mine collapse. So so it probably would make sense for them to keep a low profile.
And now I can't find it in my notes, but our doctor friend, you know, he's reunited with his family. I wonder if he's going to come back. We need a doctor. We know a doctor already. Is this a comeback?
Could be.
So I'm
That would be nice.
so I mean, I don't know if they would know of him, but if Ed is like Ed is awake and understanding, then he would be able to be like, "Hey, I know a doctor."
Oh, that's true. Though, given how far out they are, my guess is it's probably more likely that they're going to wind up running into Alphonse and them at that village because it sounds like that's the closest village to where they are. It's like I don't think they could take the I don't think Ed would survive the whole train ride down to Central.
Oh, I forgot that they were up in Briggs area in the north. Huh. Well, Winry is not going to be happy.
Yeah, so it's most likely, if I had to guess, they're probably going to wind up at that same village because we know that area is pretty desolate. So I don't know that there's a ton of villages that they can wind up at, but who knows?
Wasn't there a doctor that treated Kimberly just a couple episodes ago?
Yeah, but I think he was a military doctor because I think he was like I mean, it could be the same doctor. I don't know, but I thought he was a military doctor.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to get like he is definitely not on, you know, the side of Ed and Al and everyone. He's knows what's going on. So I wonder if we're gonna go to him. Like there's some kind of conflict there now, I feel.
Yeah, and I just don't think the Chimera in particular know that the brothers are like a sacrifice and they need to be kept alive and in one piece and everything. So it's not likely that they'll say, well, we can take him to the military doctor because they're not going to harm him because they're a sacrifice. They'll probably think that Ed's life is in danger as well.
Yeah, and it definitely that whole scene. I definitely did one of those like I was shocked because it does that thing where it's zoomed in on Ed, and you're like, oh, he survived Kimberly's explosion. Everything's good. And then it zooms out a little bit, and you're like, oh, everything is not good. There's a beam going through his chest.
Yeah, and it's like, oh man, he's not going to well, how is he going to survive this? Like this is clearly a fatal wound, and the only thing that's keeping him alive is that the pipe going through him is like, you know, is keeping the blood from spilling out. But yeah, it's like, yeah, he's not. It's not good for him.
And again, we get to see how great an alchemist he is. That he's just what he's seen in kind of his studies and what he's experienced in his journey so far. He's able to use himself as a philosopher, like his own, uh, was it his own energy, his own body's energy, as somewhat of a philosopher's stone to help heal his, not fix his organs, but like just close the wound.
Yeah, get him to a point where he's no longer in danger of dying immediately. But yeah, he still needs to see a doctor to kind of get completely patched up. And yeah, I think the only, I mean, granted, it is downside, but as far as I could tell, the only downside to it was that he says that it's probably going to take a few years off of his life, which, I guess is, having a few years taken off of the end of your life versus dying right there. Obviously, there is a difference. And I like what he says a little thing then where he says, like, if this is the price for showing mercy, then I guess I have to get used to paying it.
Which is great because it's like someone else could be like, oh, I shouldn't have let them live. If I would have just kind of gone with the plan, then I wouldn't be in this situation. But he's like, I believe in humanity so much, and I want to see the good in people that I'm willing to make these sacrifices.
Yeah, it definitely stands out with his character.
And it's great seeing at the end. I don't know if it's great because Al's going through something right now, but I like seeing how the brothers are truly connected. Like they said in a few episodes back when Ed saw Al's body, and you were like, there is some kind of bond between him and his brother that is keeping his soul on Earth.
Exactly. There is some kind, because their blood mixed, I think is what they're trying to insinuate, was like, since their blood mixed through doing all that stuff, doing the alchemic experiment, they are forever tied together, which is pretty cool.
Though, what horrible timing! Like Al is already going through this crisis of he's feeling his body calling his soul back, and now he's like this moment. It's just it's a lot.
Yes. And Al's probably going to be even more scared just because, like you mentioned, he already had these feelings and that he had that weird moment when he was out in the snow where he saw his body. So he's probably going to be very just self conscious of the fact that he's probably, not too far away from vanishing or his soul leaving the body of armor.
I really hope. I mean, we still got. We're just at the start of season 4, and we got season 5 left. I hope we get some like Al gets some time of rest. Not not like we take him out of action, but let's give him like some good story. Let him have some time where he can recoup. I feel this is very stressful for Al.
I think so too. Well, hopefully he gets it. I would feel bad if he does not. He definitely needs rest.
And now, yeah, and maybe he'll get it in this Ishvalan kind of a refuge place that Scar is taking them to. So we know that they're not going to go to Briggs because Al warned them, and then Scar knows this kind of refuge place that his people have set up. So they're heading that way.
Huh. Yeah, I think that, well, they're going to have to spend some time translating the stuff, so I guess that would give Al plenty of time to rest. I imagine they're not going to be able to translate it overnight.
I do wonder if we're going to see any people that Scar knows.
Possibly. I mean, for the fact that he knew where that camp was, kind of implies that he may have been there once before. Like, we know that he's come up there, but at least we know he's been in that area at least once before because he had to hide his brother's notes. So, yeah, he probably knows some people there.
This is a great way. These two episodes are a great way to start off the season. I'm very excited to see what what this town's gonna be like, how the Briggs people are gonna deal with everything. So I'm ready to like hit the ground running again.
I am looking forward to seeing what happens, how Ed survives, what happens when they get to the village, what kind of news they find in the notes, all of that.
Yeah, and we're getting more of Hohenheim, so I'm ready to see like how he's gonna fit more into this picture.
Yes, Hohenheim is. At some point, they're all going to have to get together and meet each other and stuff.
Oh, it's gonna be crazy too. Mustang's team and General Armstrong's team and Scar's team and Teacher and Ed and Al and Winry and Hohenheim and all these people. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, I can't wait to see. And I also want to know more about what they're trying to do, what Father and the Homunculi are planning. Like we already know that they are trying to. We already know that they're trying to create the transmutation circle and turn the country into Philosopher's Stone. But I want to know why.
And after last episode, it's I don't know, for at least for me it's even more confusing. Like you did it once, but I thought that was to get your body. So I don't understand why you're doing it again.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely something crazy there.
So unless there's a like even bigger homunculus and an even bigger flask somewhere that they're like, we need a body for this guy. So I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they're trying to create more homunculi. Who knows?
So I oh man. And then Salim is out there. There's so many like things that are happening. Like, oh, it's a lot.
Well, hopefully we get to find more next episode. I mean, we obviously will, but we could talk about it on our next episode.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us this week, as always. Can't wait to hear from you guys next week. Can't wait to talk more about FullMetal Alchemist. And yeah, so as always, I've been Jason.
I'm Jimmy.
Bye.
Bye.